Okay, so this is assignment 1, study the sketch. And if you've read the assignment description in Blackboard, then you know that you want to pick 2 artists from the list, or if you have specific artists that you want to work with, then email me and check on that. But you want to, if you're going with 2 artists from the list, then Google them with the word drawing and try to find a drawing of a figure, not specifically a painting, preferably, because paintings are a little bit harder. They're more challenging to translate into a drawing. What we're looking for is something with a lot of drawing marks and texture that you're going to try to replicate in your sketchbook. And here what I've done is I've actually printed it off at full size, so that's going to make it easier for me, because when I copy it into here, it's going to be easier to translate the scale from one element to the next, as opposed to drawing from a screen, which is also acceptable, but you just have to save that, download that image and upload that to Blackboard along with a scan or photo of your assignment. A scan being better, because it'll replicate your artwork more accurately than a photo will. Okay, so now that I have my source image, this is Michelangelo back study, and what you want to do is try to use the same materials as possible. If your research actually shows you, indicates this is a Michelangelo drawing from this period or this year. I don't need to know the year, but it might have information on the material that was used. And I believe this one was red chalk, even though it actually looks like ink, but I'm pretty sure they weren't using pens back in his day. Okay, and what I'm going to do now is start kind of breaking this into basic shapes and showing you more or less how to go about replicating this image and learning his techniques. Okay, so with any other drawing that we're doing, you always start with gestural lines and construction lines. And I'm using a 2H pencil. This is an architectural lead holder. It's an architectural pencil. It's not part of your drawing kit, but this is what I often use at home. But this is, the 2H is lighter than an HB or the Bs. So, and I covered some of that in the description of the course materials. But if you have an HB pencil like this, then that's sufficient to get your initial drawing started. You don't want to go darker than this, like the 2B, 4B, all the way up to 9B. You don't want to use anything that dark. So HB and very light lines to begin with. So we're breaking this whole thing down into the most fundamental basic shapes within the first couple minutes. And what I would stress is to not draw the head first. You draw the torso. Always, always. I remember when I was first learning to draw the figure, I had a tendency to stick the head on, and then I learned over time that was not that's not the best way to start, because you want to figure out where the mass of your figure is going to be placed on the page, and then heads are like an appendage. It gets attached on afterwards. Okay, so you have like this kind of triangle shape and like this kind of blocky shape for the pelvis, and it's twisting. So I'm going to use the overhand grip right now, but you could use the writing grip. And I'm doing very, very light lines. You might not be able to see it in the video, but that's kind of what you're going for, is you're going for trying to create very light lines that you don't really have to commit to. And I'm trying to get the twist of the form. Okay, so you have a mass here, and then you have a leg here. So just this kind of fat sausage, and then one of the glutes, right? And you notice that his butt crack kind of ends quite low before the waist. So there's this whole area right here that needs to also get addressed. So you just make sure you have enough space for that. Then I'm going across the shoulders and indicating the deltoid, bicep, tricep. When I'm drawing in my sketchbook, I do tend to use the writing grip, mostly because the book is sitting flat on a surface. But if I'm drawing on a wall and doing gestural marks, I tend to use the overhand grip. What I like about this drawing is that there's areas that are highly developed with a lot of very tight cross-hatching, and you can just really feel the volume of this musculature. But then there's other areas where it's just been left to kind of fade off. So it just has this kind of organic flow to it, and it kind of implies that the body is in motion. It has this kind of gestural quality. Okay. Whenever you catch yourself doing anything that's detailed at this point, then you just, like I'm going to do this curve right here, but then you don't, at this stage, you're not really wanting to get into too much detail. You want to make sure that all your major proportions are correct. And one way to do that here is because I'm copying from one page to the other as opposed to working really from the model. So I can literally measure with my finger and my drawing utensil from that point to that point. It's identical practically. I've got the armpit to the edge of the opposite deltoid. And yep, that's correct. Okay, what else? So maybe from the bottom of the glute to the middle of the neck. That is pretty close. Looks like right there. So it looks like actually this could all be higher. Either that goes higher or that goes lower. So what I'm going to do is probably make this part stretched out a bit more. And learning to kind of evaluate those proportions it's a skill that you develop with just a lot of practice. But just something for you to be aware of. I'm not looking for accuracy, perfect accuracy. I'm just looking to see what everyone can do, and just get into the mode of drawing and observing and analyzing and reproducing. You're gonna inevitably pick up a little bit of anatomical knowledge with this exercise, but you're also picking up some experience in manipulating your tools and observing and trying to create systems of marks. So when I'm going down this contour, what helps for me is to get that shape correct is looking at the negative space, which is right here. This is the positive space, so that's the figure. This is the ground, which is also the negative space. It's all the space outside of the object. And if I look at that shape, if I could cut this shape out like that, does that edge, is that edge kind of close to or identical to this edge? because sometimes looking at that space, you might be able to see it more clearly than looking at the shape of this, even though they share the same edge. Try looking at the negative space. So you look at the negative space here. It's got like these kind of folds of muscle, right? Is it the same over here? It's pretty close. It's not exactly, you know. So, and when I say look at these things and check if they're correct, again, I'm not looking for absolute perfection. That can be a trap, but these are all tips just to help you improve. So I also have my kneadable eraser here for students who have never used a kneadable eraser. You break it out of the plastic that it came in, and then you kind of have to soften it up by squishing it like this and molding it. And I love these things because they are so good for picking up small areas. Like if I want to get rid of that line, I just go like this. And because I'm drawing so lightly right now, it has no problem removing it. It's pretty much white. Whereas if you start putting in really, really dark lines, this isn't enough to erase it, and then you have to switch to a hard eraser. I've got my click eraser here, or white Staedtler eraser, which I don't have right in front of me right now. And then you have to deal with all these low eraser bits. So if you're drawing lightly enough, then that'll help you find where your drawing is going to go, and you have no problem erasing it with one of these if you need to. I try to discourage erasing unless you absolutely have to, or like I had a line right there that I knew that I didn't need. But all these lines in here, I think they just add to the overall composition to just create dynamism, and it just creates visual energy. So I'm going to probably keep a lot of them. They're very light, and they are not going to be distracting as I'm developing this drawing. And so keeping that history of all those lines can make a drawing much more energetic and visually interesting. Okay, so how are my proportions going? Like this leg could be fatter. And then this area doesn't have a lot of defined boundaries, so it actually just has a lot of tone coming off of it. And I think his head is a little bit larger. And drawing the back of the head and neck is challenging, so it's not an area that we look at a lot, so we don't have as much of a database in our imaginations for what that space looks like. So just very careful observation of your subject to replicate. The drawing is what's required. Just very careful observation of relationships of shapes against each other. Okay, at this point, for the purposes of the drawing, for the video, I'm going to switch to a uniball pen, which also is not in the kit, but they're super fun to draw with. I've got micron pens and uniball pens and Staedtler pens. So this is micron, this is uniball, and they come in different sizes. The microns have a fine felt tip, so this one is super tiny, and I don't use it that much. That one's a bit fatter, 0.05, and then the uniballs are just fantastic. I've been using these for years and years. Okay, so I'm switching to that one just because I want to try to make the line work more visible for the video. And what I'm doing here is really analyzing the direction of the lines and how they create form and volume. So right here you have like this mass that just feels very round, and it's because there's darker lines towards the bottom and a tighter concentration of layers of line work on top of each other. So that's what we're going for, and just being cognizant of the direction. Like I have a system of lines going this way and a system of lines going that way. And for most of us, I'm right-handed, but even a left-handed person, you have this natural direction of how your hand wants to make these kinds of marks, like this, right? As opposed to that or something crazy. And in this drawing, I have lines going in lots of different directions. And some of those directions may not be natural for you. So you might want to turn your book upside down or to the side. I'm not going to because it's going to mess up this video a little bit. But basically, if you find your hand trying to go at a weird angle, just turn your book and make it as comfortable for you to draw as possible. So again, I'm not trying to go for total accuracy right now. I'm just looking at areas where there's a buildup of line work, and I'm trying to generally follow those patterns and how dense they are and the direction in the muscle masses that they're trying to describe. So I'm going to put this image into Blackboard as a sample to follow, and I'm totally okay if you just use this one because it's just a fantastic example of what we're trying to do here with learning how to make different kinds of marks, with building the body. It's just a great example, and this edge around is called the contour. And notice that the contour changes. In some areas are very thick, and some areas are thin to the point of disappearing. So that's just something to be aware of. These areas, it takes on this more kind of a graphic, illustrative quality. That's less realistic. If you were trying to make a study of a model and make it as realistic as possible, you wouldn't have a solid black line anywhere because our bodies don't have like a thick black line all the way around. So you would have some lines that indicate the edge of a shape, and then you build up the tone to the end of that shape, and have an edge without a solid thick line. Just something to be aware of. I'm not criticizing Michelangelo. He was amazing, but just something to be aware of is when you put a thick black line around an object, you're kind of diverging from reality, from a realistic representation. I wish that this was some kind of a live stream so that we'd be able to get some direct questions back about what I'm doing, but it is asynchronous. So what I'm trying to do is provide you a good demo and talk about all the things that I learned in trying to learn how to do this over the years, and then you can watch it as many times as you need to pick up on those skills and lessons. there's something to be said for copying from other artists like this, because when you're just learning, because why reinvent the wheel? This is not, you're not creating your own artwork in this, so it's not, there's no shame in copying, because you're not trying to tell anybody that this is your artwork. This is an exercise. And when students are, like, if a music student was learning to play anything, like say the piano, then they would do exercises where they try to play existing pieces of music, classical music or whatever. And they're not trying to claim it as their own. They're just trying to learn from other people that figured that stuff out already. You gotta know the rules before you can break them, or something like that. So if you were doing all this shading with a darker pencil, the same thing would be happening that you're seeing now, is that as you build up deeper layers of tone, then all the light stuff underneath gets pushed down and it recedes, and you don't need to erase any of it. It just gets buried in there. The muscles of the back are harder to follow and understand than the muscles of the front of the torso. So it's only through looking at like anatomical studies, diagrams, or very muscular people that we get to understand how the back muscles are formed and how they kind of sit against each other. So this is just an all-around great sample to study and learn from. You see how as I'm drawing, I'm not even consciously working on one area going, oh, okay, I've done this part enough, and I go move on. Like I've which is what I'm doing, but I've been drawing long enough that it's become sort of an unconscious habit to go, okay, at any given time, have I overworked one area to the detriment of one other area? Probably. So you just you work in one area and you move on, and you take a step back, look at it. In this case, I'd have to stand up and go, does this feel like this generally? What's not working? Assume that I've already got the proportions right before you do any shading at all. You really check to see if your proportions are sort of correct. And if you're not sure, because this sort of looks like this, but you're not sure, sometimes pick up both of them and turn them upside down, or hold them up to a mirror, because when you flip it, then some of the errors really pop out. Some of the parts that are not replicated correctly. So try that. Either turn it upside down, or stick it in front of a mirror, and just try to study each part and see if there's something that doesn't quite match up. And then the one other technique, of course, is to grid something, which is not part of, it's not what I'm recommending, but if you were taking a small drawing and you wanted to translate it to a much larger surface, like a 5-foot canvas, then you could grid the entire drawing and break it into rows and rows of squares, and then have the equivalent ratio of squares on your larger surface, and you just copy the information from one square over to another, and then all the proportions will be exactly accurate. And that's what people used to do long before computers, long before cameras. They gridded stuff. There's no shame in that. Okay, I like these marks that are kind of on the side where there's where things just sort of like fade off here. And I'm not copying everything exactly right. I'm just trying to go for the general feel of things. And I like how the lines, sometimes there's like double lines. I've done it a couple right here a little bit. And I like that because it just kind of further emphasizes that this is a figure in motion with life and vitality. Okay, I think that I could keep picking at this and messing with it, but I am going to stop there, and I hope you get the sense that of what we're trying to accomplish here. You're not going for perfect mechanical reproduction, but you're just trying to get the feel of things, proportion, and then the line systems, the mark making. You're trying to replicate that with a tool that's similar to what the artist originally used, to the best of your knowledge, as if your research can help you indicate that. And then once you're going to squint, close your eyes like halfway, and that's going to really emphasize the darkest areas. So I'm squinting right now, and that's the dark area. That is there. Those are the darkest areas. And when you squint, it kind of obscures some of the detail, and those shadow areas pop out. And I look at this one and go, well, are those shadow areas accurate here? This one could be a little bit darker right here. This could be a little bit darker there. I mean, this technique of squinting has been around forever, and it's still, it works really well. It helps you see what areas are not dark enough. And that's just really important, that contrast in tone. Okay. All right, that's it. And what I'm going to do is right here, study the sketch 1 of 2 and write my name. Okay, not that you have to write it on here, because I will see in Blackboard, everyone's assignment will come in on their profile. But for yourself, for your records in your sketchbook beyond this class, you might want to have a record that that's what this was for. And then this, you might cut it out so it fits, and then tape it right in your book so that you have that reference for later on. Because for me, that's what makes sketchbooks really dynamic, is not just your drawings, but all the little things that you add into them. Okay, thanks for watching.